We'll be starting in 2 minutes. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Masonic Seminar Series. My name is Brother Katie, and I will be your host / presenter this month, as I am every month. I want to welcome those who are returning and those who are new, give you my opening spiel so we can get into today's discussion. The Masonic Seminar Series was created to help provide information for those who were interested in Freemasonry but didn't really know a lot about it and had questions. And we found that having this platform really helped kind of fill out some questions that individuals had throughout the years. So I'm grateful to be here. What you see tonight in every presentation is just the presenter's study and research, and is not the official opinion of Universal Co-Masonry. I have here in the office / studio Brother Patrick Alessandra, who is running our various platforms such as X, Twitter? No, X is Twitter. X, Facebook, YouTube, and we have Brother Benjamin Hartle, who is working on Zoom. So welcome to everyone who is coming from whatever platform that you're coming from. This evening, we're going to do something a little bit different that we normally don't do very often, which is a question and answer session. So this is a little bit more interactive. The Masonic Seminar Series tends to be more of a lecture style type group. So this will be a lot more discussion, I hope. And I hope you have a lot of good questions. Even if you think they're silly or stupid, please ask them, because you may have someone else in the room that has the same question, and information is always good to have in our head. So I'm going to start. I'm going to let you guys kind of get warmed up. I'm going to start talking about just different things about Freemasonry in general, and as well as Universal Co-Masonry in particular, just so that way those questions can arrive. Once you have a question, please use the virtual hand option, and I will call on you and unmute you, so that way we can have a very civilized discussion this evening. So a little bit about Universal Co-Masonry. One of the main questions that many of us get here at the general office is it Freemasonry? And absolutely it is. We have a heritage that goes all the way back to the United Grand Lodge of England, although our charters do not hail from them, just to be clear on that. So we are Freemasonry. There's different types of masonry, and if you're feeling called or curious about Freemasonry and you're not really sure where you want to be or what you're looking for, it helps to start with finding the right type of Freemasonry for the needs you're looking for. I will start out and tell you what we are at Universal Co-Masonry are not. We are not a networking group. We don't provide connections. In fact, we don't publish our membership information. If you wanted someone's phone number, you have to ask them directly for it. We don't share that. We don't publish our lodges. We're very different focus in the networking. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not the place for you. Although if you have an interest in the esoteric, in the small hidden knowledge that lies beyond the veil, that's what we're about. We're Freemasonry that looks at the hidden and the secret and the very selective knowledge for those who are willing to mine for it. That's what we are. Another distinction that we are is that we accept men and women. We do not discriminate on either way. So it's not an all male or all female organization, but it is for both. So my husband's a Mason, But in Lodge, we are not a married couple. We are brothers. We're members. Our membership goes above our marriage in the sense of when I'm in Lodge, I am not reliant on him and he is not reliant on me. We're individuals. So we do have single people, we have married people, but when everyone's in Masonry, we all are on our own in the sense that this is each person's personal journey. And yes, you share it with many people, but you need to do the work yourself and not have someone else be there for you. So that's one of the two major distinctions, is that we are esoteric, philosophic Freemasonry, and we accept men and women. So, and at any time, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer it. Edward, your hand is raised.
Yes, good evening. Since you mentioned the first part, the esoteric knowledge, as far as I understand, it is we have all the information all around, like the Bible and other sacred books, but the esoteric part of it is kind of like the password to unopen the folder or open the folder and understand the real meaning or the real I don't know, let's say the real meaning, what's behind of it, in order to encrypt the information that is in many traditions and many even myths of histories that we know. So can you expand a little bit more on that, if it's possible?
Edward, to your question, are you asking like how is it esoteric, or what is esotericism or occultism? I'm not quite sure what direction you want me to go.
Yeah, exactly. What is esoteric? Since the occult is something that is unknown, so unknown information to many of the people, what is the part of esoteric, or what is really esoteric regarding the symbolizing, and then what is esoteric for Freemasons, basically?
Okay, great question. So esotericism is meant for a small group of people, and that's why Freemasonry is an application organization. We just don't open our doors and allow anyone in. You have to be ready to be mining the secrets and the information and the wisdom and the consciousness of the occult. You have to be ready to come into contact with that. And so esotericism is that it's a small group of people. And when I say small group, I know people think like 4 or 5, but if we look at the all male Masons, which people are mostly familiar with, they have memberships in the millions. We do not have membership in the millions. We are for a small group that want to spend the time to unearth that which is trying to speak to us. I often think, and this is my perception of the occult, that the occult has its consciousness, and we're trying to bring our consciousness into contact with that. But you have to have it on the right frequency. You can't just throw any consciousness against that occultism. And so Freemasonry strives to prepare its initiates to be able to come into contact with the varying levels of consciousness of the occult knowledge that is permeating and ubiquitous throughout the universe. And that's what Freemasonry is trying to get us to do. I like to say that Freemasonry is universal, but it is not for everyone. There are some people who have different wants, those who are of the more modern things of, wanting money and fame and fortune and power in the negative sense of the word power. That's just not what we do here at Universal Co-Masonry. We're given in steps, which is what we call degrees. We're given information and tools to help us uncover what's hidden in each of those degrees and hopefully come into the consciousness, the frequency of that consciousness for that degree. So we use symbols, we use drama, myth, we use music, we use incense. There's a large array of tools in which Freemasonry works to help us become elevated in our consciousness and come into contact with the occult. So Edward, I hope that answered your question. I know it was kind of a different approach than maybe you were expecting, but did I answer that for you?
Oh, yes, yes. Parts of it, at least.
Well, it's hard to talk about Freemasonry specifically because you don't want to get into the actual degree and like what we do. Which brings me into the kind of the next part of information is different obediences, Masonic obediences keep things either more open to the public that they do or closer to the vest. You'll find that Universal Co-Masonry is much more conservative in what we share with the outer world. And that has a lot to do with that people, again, have to be prepared to hear what's being said and what's trying to be given through these dramas and these symbols. So, the all-seeing eye, which, has become one of the iconic symbols of Freemasonry throughout the world, that has a purpose in Freemasonry. What that means, you have to be ready to go through and be prepared to understand the meaning of that. And each symbol has a layer and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I don't think any symbol has a floor. And I don't think any symbol has a ceiling. I think it is limitless in its understanding. And again, that doesn't mean that it's whatever you think it is. I think you're looking at symbols to be more intrinsic. There's something inherent in the symbols that Freemasonry is preparing your consciousness to unearth. Other questions that people have about Freemasonry, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the topic we're on right now. It can kind of be a smattering. And if I'll just keep talking until there's more questions.
Matt Hack has this actually.
Oh, Matt, I can't see your hand. So, but Brother Benjamin says you have a question. So, Matt, what can I do for you?
Oops, I'm sorry. Does every step have a symbol that you have to study? Like every section, if you're not just say when you first get into masonry, do you study that symbol only? Or is that do you get on certain symbols when different degrees for different steps?
That's an excellent
Like, do you
question.
study more than just one
Mhm.
symbol? Or
Yeah,
like you
so
said, bossy and I earlier or whatever
right.
with the first step or yeah.
So there is a myriad of symbols in every degree. And sometimes you'll see the same symbol in various degrees, but think of symbols as words. And let's put it in that context because we're all familiar with language, which symbolism is a language. When you have words that are put in different sequences in a sentence, that sentence means something entirely different. Symbolism is no different in that. So there is a myriad of symbols in every degree. And we don't just sit there and say, okay, we're just going to study this one symbol. And then once you've mastered understanding that, then you can go to the next degree. I've been in masonry since 2002, and I'm still sometimes just amazed about the symbols I find in the first degree, which I've seen a lot of first degree meetings over my time. And there's new information because every time you go to a lodge meeting, you're not the same person you were at the last lodge meeting. So your perception is different, your understanding is different. So each degree uses symbols. Some of them are specific to that degree. Some of them are used throughout the entire degree system, or we call it a ladder, or rite, R-I-T-E. They'll be in a lot of the degrees. But what changes the understanding or the interaction or the study of it, Matt, is that we're looking at the sentence that it's been put in and the context that's been put in. So Masonry is one grand Masonic drama, one grand principled narrative. And when you are looking at a story and you study sections of it, that's very much what the degree does. So it's not just one symbol, though you can focus on it if you'd like. It is a plethora of symbols, and you're looking at understanding each one in the context of how they're presented in the degree and in the story of the grand drama. So there's a lot of length and a lot of width and a lot of height to it. So it's very voluminous. It has a lot in there. So, sometimes you get a younger Mason, and when I say younger, I'm not talking about age, I'm talking about mental maturity. Sometimes they're a little younger and they're just like, oh, I get so bored. And it's like, I don't know how you can get bored. There's so much to unpack every meeting. And then when you get a new degree, you have that context to add into it. So again, you add another layer to it. So like I said before, there's no ceiling and there's no floor. And so it's just this endless journey. Now that can be overwhelming when you have something that has no boundaries. And what we have in masonry, and this is true for all masonry, is you'll be placed with a brother to help you get through your studies. The purpose of the brother isn't to tell you like what to think in a sense of like, this is how you have to interpret it. The purpose of the brother is to say, this is the context in what the symbol or the degree is working in, and then to help you ask the right questions so you can get to the right answers. That's their jobs, because it can get overwhelming. Oftentimes you hear in education that children are digital learners, and they're not. The problem with learning online is there's no boundaries, and that can be very overwhelming. And that's the same thing here, is Masonry seems to have no boundaries. I've never touched any boundary in Masonry that it's so far away that it oftentimes can be overwhelming. So having an expert brother to help guide you through the degree and learn about it and ask questions and challenge yourself and challenge your understanding really helps build out the experience. A lot of people come to Masonry because they're looking for community of like-minded people. Again, not that we believe the same thing, but we're in search of the same thing. And I think that's a very different way of approaching it. So I hope that answered your question, Matt. Anthony, it's good to see your hand raised. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you for your time. I guess since we're on this topic, with the understanding that I really don't have any clue of what's going on with these different degrees, or what I'm going to term level of advancement, if you will. I'm wondering if this is something where it's mostly a time-based thing, as far as okay, you didn't do it right, you failed or whatever, you can retry, but you have to wait X number of months or next year or something? Or is it more like this person has this, they come to the table with this amount of skill, are they able to advance rapidly, so to speak? Yeah.
Okay, so there's two ways I'm going to answer that question. The first way is just in regards to like the application process. There is a minimum time that has to transpire. Like you can't read someone's application and process it in a week. It takes several months. And then it's balloted on by the lodge. The lodge members that possess their degree vote on whether or not they would like to accept that person as a member. If that person is rejected, the door, this is the really important thing, is like a lot of people are afraid of rejection, which I think is a human thing. I always hear like, oh, what if I get rejected? Like, am I never allowed to be a Mason? No, the door is never shut. You have a year from the day of your, letter saying, unfortunately, you've been rejected, to apply again. And in the meantime, if you really, really want to do it, you want to come to seminar, you want to go to the Masonic Philosophical Society, you want to work with the person, the master of the lodge, to, if it was me and I got rejected, I'd be like, well, what can I do to improve so I can become ready? And I've shared this story in the past, so if you've heard it, forgive me for the duplicate story, but there was a brother who's a brother now, but many, many years ago, she wanted to join and she just wasn't ready. And she didn't go through the application process. She was denied an application just up front. She asked for it and we were like, yeah, you're not ready. You need more time. And she was really upset. It was very unpleasant. I mean, no one wants to tell anyone that, hey, you're not ready. But to her credit, she spent about 3 years getting herself prepared, mentally, spiritually, getting her in the right place. And eventually she applied and she was accepted. And she's been a Mason for over a decade now. And I asked her one time, I said, do you tell me about that experience. Do you feel like you were done right or wrong in that you had to wait to apply? And she said, if I had not waited, if you guys had not refused me, I would have left before I even got into Masonry, because it would have been too much for me. And I often think back to that story. It's hard in the moment, but up front, if we can help, like the door of Masonry is never shut. And if you really, really want to do it, the right question isn't, is Freemasonry for me? If it's, what do I need to do to be ready to be a Mason? And then the master or whoever you're working with can help you. Oftentimes it's usually, you're not consistent in your attendance, or you're very emotional and you get upset about everything, or, whatever the reason. So that's one prong. Anthony, I think you're speaking more to the second one that I'm going to answer. There are examinations in Masonry, and it's not every degree, but quite a few of them. And you want to demonstrate a proficiency. So I didn't say mastery, I said proficiency. And I do specifically mean that because we will spend our entire life, and I believe in reincarnation, so I will say entire lives, trying to learn the lessons of the first degree. They're that profound, and they're that fundamental to returning to the source, to raising our own or elevating our own consciousness, that I don't think no matter how many degrees or how far we advance, we're always working in the first degree. But that being said, that's more of a metaphysical response. There are proficiency tests, because you want to make sure that you have, to Matt's question, the understanding of certain things, whether it's technical or whether it's spiritual or whether it's metaphysical. You should have a proficient understanding of what the first degree or the second degree or whatever degree you're in is trying to get you to understand. So you demonstrate proficiency. And there is, there's an examination. So questions are asked and you respond. There's writing, you write your ideas and what you've learned. If you're like, man, I hate writing, or I'm scared of writing, again, that brother that's with you through your process will help you learn how to put your thoughts together and to articulate that which seems ineffable. That's the conundrum, trying to explain that which cannot be explained, and help you get your ideas out in written form that is that can reach the audience, which is the Masons in the lodge. So that expert brother will help you. So there's writing, there's an examination, there's the requirement of attendance. Sometimes someone will join Masonry and they just want to expedite themselves through the process. Unfortunately, a quick elevation in Masonry does not allow for consciousness to follow, meaning that every degree transforms and hopefully purifies and improves your consciousness. If you go too fast, you don't have that purification process happening at the same time. So you lose a lot. One of the examples that I'll bring up, and I hate bringing it up because it ultimately always gets into the discussion of drugs, which I will be honest, I tire with sometimes. So there are many people that can go down to Central America and South America and do ayahuasca and have a connection with the universe. And ayahuasca, that process has been taken out of its context. Ayahuasca was used by Mexican shamans, and other shamans of Central and South America, that they spent their whole life training to be one with and to work with. And when you just take the drug without the study and the work and the labor, I'm not saying you don't experience something, but I think you're selling yourself out on what you could experience. And Masonry is the same way. That if you go too fast, if you just try to go to that, like, I just want the 33rd degree, I really don't care about the rest, like, the story won't make sense. You'll get parts of it, like, okay, but what are you missing out of if you had just spent the time going through each degree? For that reason, there are time requirements. So you have to attend a certain amount of meetings. You have to be present for a minimum of a certain amount of stuff to make sure that you're ready to go to the next degree. So if a brother comes in with a limited set of skills, the lodge works with them to meet them at their level, which we call merit and ability. So I'm going to use Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin here in the office and pick on them. So like if we're in the first degree together, let's say the three of us were initiated together. So we came into Masonry together. Well, we're not the same person. We have our strengths and our weaknesses that vary with each, from person to person. So if we're going up for our examination to go to the next degree, I need to be judged on what my merit and my ability is. Let's say I didn't do a letter perfect exam. Let's say I made some mistakes. Well, is that me? Is that who I am? I'm not being compared to Brother Benjamin or Brother Patrick, who maybe, were letter perfect. It has to be about me. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Masonry is individualistic. It's all about the individual. So when we compare people, Anthony, or when we test people, rather, we're not comparing them. It's all about what they can do. And we meet them where they're at. It's called meeting on the level. We meet them where they're at. And the tricky part is not to over or underestimate someone. You have to really learn who they are. For that reason, lodges are small. It's not a congregational setting. You know, you have 500 people. You may know their name, but you may not know them at all. And you may not even know if they didn't come to, you know, lodge the last 5 times. In Universal Co-Masonry, we're a family, you know, and when a brother's not there, we know it in the sense of like, man, I really miss Benjamin. He was gone. He, you know, he had to go back home for some reason, whatever, you know. So there's that family that helps the individual meet them where they're at, test them where they're at, even though it's the same exam. Like, we wouldn't lessen the exam just because one person over the other. Like, it's the same exam, but did we all meet what was our ability? Did we do what we could do individually to the best of our ability? And that's what we measure on. And it takes a family to know what the individual can and can't do, right? Lots of experience of sitting in lodge and interacting. There are some degrees that don't have an examination, but they still have minimum time requirements and attendance. Again, you don't want to just go through like a degree mill, just collecting degrees, because they don't mean anything. I sat at a table one time with a Mason from another order who had the 32nd. He got it over a weekend in another obedience. And, you know, he was very proud of it, which I think is great, but, you know, it takes us a long time to get to the 32nd here, and, you know, many, many, many years. So there's a difference in the gravitas of getting a degree than just going really fast. So we meet people where they're at, we understand their skill sets to the best of our ability, and then we work with what they bring. And then there are some brothers who are great at memorization and some who are not, you know. So again, we work with them where they're at. So it's very customized, even though there's a set framework. Like, we all take the same exam, like the exams that Brother Benjamin and Brother Patrick took, I've taken, and the brothers here have taken. Like, it's the same exam, but again, there's that customized experience of, did they do what they need to do? That was a really long answer, Anthony, but it was a great question. And I know I took it in a couple different ways than maybe what you intended, but there's a lot of information there. The one thing that Freemasonry can feel like at times is like a big fire hydrant just spraying water all over you, and you just have all of this occult experience just being smattered on your body, and you're just like, it's overwhelming. So having the time to go through and process it really, really makes the difference. So let's go to the next question. Edgar, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Katie. I don't know if they're already asked about is there any specific quiz or initiation test or characteristics for someone to be accepted to the first degree?
You're talking like required.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some technical ones and there's more like metaphysical ones, and I can talk about both if you'd like. So the technical ones, you know, you have to, seminar is a big deal. One thing that we check for with someone who's applying is if they're going to seminar, we know that they can show up, which you're like, that's really kind of juvenile. But a lot of times people will say they want to do it and they never show up. And if they can't make an online meeting, I don't know how they're going to make an in-person meeting. So we look at them attending Masonic seminar. They need to be able to not have a felony. And that was a tricky one, because we do have people who have felonies that try to inquire, and every person's different, but the broad stroke is no felonies. So that's important. You have to be over 21. There's an application you have to fill out and the fee is to submit, and it has to be processed, as I said, through the lodge. That's the technical stuff. The more metaphysical one is that the person has to be of mature age, which specifically can be 21 or older. There is no end, like there's no end age. Like, you can't be a Mason beyond such age. It's 21 or older, unless you have parents who are Masons, and then the kids can join at 18. 21 and older is mature age, but the mature age also means like mentally, like I was saying earlier. Sometimes you have someone who's older and just, you know, everything's a joke, nothing is taken serious. They can't, you know, they have a very immature mind. So there's that part to it. Sound judgment, strict morals, upright, very virtuous. We're not looking for perfect, because we would have no one in Masonry if that was a requirement. But we're looking for people who have a leg up and understanding their morality, that they're not, you know, just trying to find a community to help them get through life. Like, in the financial sense. But individuals who, morality is really, really important if you want to live a life worthy of being remembered by. And Masonry is looking for individuals who already have a predisposition for that. Unfortunately, we get inquiries all the time that they would sell their soul to the darkest force if they could just, be a Mason. And it's like, yeah, well, that's counter to what we're doing. We don't want that, we want people who are moral and virtuous. So just, upright, and free, sound judgment, mature age, and strict morals. Those five it's kind of tough because, like, how do you measure if someone's moral? Because my morality in the way that I have a metric is going to be different than maybe somebody else's. But that's where conversations come through, and that's where we talk to the people that are applying to see where they're at. To me, it's not so much like, are you of this political standpoint or this particular religion? It's more about, why are you coming to Masonry, and what is it that you're looking for in that process? The other stuff is just, examples of what you think of on a very fundamental level. Religion and politics, all that stuff in Masonry, a lot of people say you can't talk about. In our order, you can talk about those things. And we talk about them all the time, but the difference is we don't talk about specifics. Like, we don't sit there and say, well, this person is better for president over that person. We do, what are the virtues and traits that make the best type of president? Is it a philosopher king? Is it this, not which party, because that can be very divisive right up front. Religion, same thing. We talk about religion in all different contexts, and we have members of various faiths. So you'll see that the requirements to become a Freemason, you have the technical stuff you have to meet, and then you have the preparedness, that where's your conscious level at? Where is your consciousness, rather? So there's kind of two levels to it. It's kind of bifurcates, but they're very important. It's very important to be who you are up front. So I think some people are afraid that they have to, like, put on a show because, they're not perfect and they don't want other people to know that they're not. Well, we already know that you're not, because no one's perfect. And it's best to find out up front if this isn't for you than to go through the whole process and then realize, yeah, this isn't what I want, or I need to make some improvements, and I should have done that way back when. So I hope that answers your question, Edgar. Patrick, what do we got?
All right, so I got a couple questions. First one is from YouTube. Val L asks, is Eastern Star the only women's one? I assume she means the only women's
Organization?
esoteric organization.
So no, Eastern Star is not the only all women's esoteric organization. And unfortunately, the Eastern Star is not doing well in the United States. I was just talking with another brother that this year marks, unfortunately, the closing of the last chapter of the Eastern Star in Colorado, which is where we're headquartered. Which, I'm not an Eastern Star, but I think that's sad. I think it had its part to play in the lives of women. But there's Freemasonry for just women. They tend to be in continental Europe, like in France and in Belgium and places like that. You can find it in other places, like in Mexico. Just as they're all male, they're all female, but the all female is not as big as the all male, and they tend to be even smaller than, like, Universal Co-Masonry or Le Droit Humain, the mixed orders that are in the middle. So Eastern Star, just to be clear, is an ancillary organization. It is not Masonry. So the women that belong to the Eastern Star are not Freemasons. They are either the wife or daughter. They have some relationship to a Master Mason, and that's why they're in the organization. Next question, Brother Patrick.
The next question is from Twitter/X. Someone wants to know, they want to join Freemasonry, but they're in Ghana.
Ghana.
So
I'd love to go to Ghana. So if you are Universal Co-Masonry, because we are a smaller organization, we do not have lodges in every state and every country. So if you are one of the individuals that, you want to be a member of Universal Co-Masonry, but there's not a lodge near you, we do have the capability to still help you become a Mason and stay connected to the community, in the hopes of, especially like in Ghana or wherever the individual's coming from, that eventually that you would, open a lodge in your area. We've seen lodges open in Croatia, in the Philippines, across the domestic, our domestic brothers, and here in North America. You can create a lodge just because there's not one there. But what we would do is say, okay, if you want to be, if you're coming from Akara, and you can't, there's not a lodge there, then you would apply to our headquarters lodge here in Colorado, and then go through the process just like everyone else. You have to fill out the application, pay the application fee, get interviewed, have the lodge vote on you. And then if you're accepted, oftentimes it's difficult to get to the US, especially if we have lodges that are individuals rather that are coming from countries that are not in, we don't have good relations with. So we will find the country that's try to get you to go to that country. So for right now, like Kenya and Ghana, a lot of inquirers from there, we're sending them to our Philippines lodges because that will help. A lot of Central America, we're sending them to the lodges in our South American district. So all the lodges will support. And eventually, when we have enough people in like Nairobi or Accra, then we can open a lodge, which is one of the best experiences. And the brothers here in the studio with me have shared in that and going to different countries and opening up lodges with the local brothers there. And it's amazing. So if you want to join, but there is not a lodge, like we don't have a lodge in Ghana, not yet, then contact the general office and Brother Patrick, and you can provide that email. And Brother Matthias, who oversees, he's the manager of our general office, can get you on the path to, membership, if that's in the stars. So is there any other questions on any other platforms?
There is another question.
And then we'll go to Anthony, because he's been patient.
So someone named Knowledge 2020 on YouTube asks, can you explain what the symbolism for the double-headed phoenix stands for? Is it the magnum opus?
Very specific question. I like it. So the double-headed eagle, or phoenix in this case, it's very, very interesting because there's a lot of layers to the double-headed eagle, which is one of the iconic symbols of Masonry, in addition to the pyramid and the LCNI. It is representative of the 32nd and the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite. And the eagle tends to be, one eagle is black and one is white. And there's a lot of places you can start with. And I'll take it from the very entry level of duality, that you have darkness and lightness that are represented by the appropriate colors, and that we are in matter. If you think that the human is the spirit within, the consciousness within the individual is on a grand journey, and it's been steeped in matter, it has to learn how to live in duality, because the consciousness comes from the source, and that source is oneness. And so when you're, I'm assuming, being a part of that oneness, we don't understand what duality is. So the black and white can represent the duality of that. It also is a mythology where two birds were sent out, related back to Noah over the flood, and the two birds were sent out, and one went east and one went west to search for land. And they circumambulated the globe and came back, and that's also representative that way. So there's a lot of different places you can take it, and that's just a few examples. But the one thing I do when I study with brothers in various degrees is I say, start with a symbol that speaks to you, and then just go for it. Go study it. Go knee deep, and it will take you down the most fantastic rabbit holes of other knowledge, and you'll come out with so much more knowledge and understanding. And so I would think that's a good place to start, is with the mythology of the double-headed eagle or the double-headed bird and the black and whiteness of duality. We're going to go to Anthony, and then we'll come back and see if there is more questions on other platforms. So Anthony.
Yeah, you touched on the felony disqualification. Something I came across a little bit ago. I'm not really sure how to put this in a question, or even if it is a question, but I briefly attempted to familiarize myself with, I believe it's Mackey's Masonic law. And I basically just went through the table of contents and, whatever drew my attention. And we've touched on this a bit before, the physical requirements aspect. And something that stood out to me a lot, I didn't really get into it heavy, but there was a lot of focus on missing limbs. And I think possibly because historically that was a form of punishment and identifying criminals, as far as taking limbs off from people. And maybe that has been brought forward potentially too much in today's world. Maybe I'm not asking anybody to change requirements or anything, but maybe in another world in the future, that's something that won't be such a disqualifier as far as missing limbs. thanks for your time.
Yeah. And it's true, you know, that is a way to identify, at least in the past, those who stepped away from the law. You know, who knows what the future will hold. I often have conversations with other brothers about what is our purpose in Masonry now, and it's, you know, to keep the mysteries. It's to hold on to it for the generations behind us. So it's, you know, we're stewards. And, you know, the Masonry that I experience is different than the Masonry that Annie Besant started with the English, or British, I should say, British Federation of Le Droit Humain. Like, and that was only 100 years ago. So, I mean, a lot has changed between her time and my time, and who knows, to Anthony's point, what will be in the future with Masonry, because although the casing of Masonry may change with time, the essence should always remain the same. I like to think that that's very true between, you know, the early 1900s and the modern era, that it looks different on the outside, but it's very much the same on the inside. So things can change while things stay the same. Patrick, any other questions?
There are a few actually.
Okay.
So Teresa Lowry on Facebook says, if you cannot travel to the main lodge due to health reasons, can you still join?
So here's the interesting thing, and I apologize because my answers are very long. I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, economize your answer, lady. But there's just so much information, and so forgive me for the length in which I respond. But Masonry, when you look at whether or not you know, due to health reasons, can you travel, you can't travel and whatnot. The one thing about Masonry is that you have to experience it. Many lifetimes ago, in this current lifetime, I was a dancer, a competitive dancer. And when you look at learning a routine or a sequence of movements, it takes a lot of practice to get that into muscle memory. And then it sits in your muscles for the rest of your life. You know, I'm not a competitive dancer anymore. I'm past my prime on that, but you know, I can still remember the way things feel, and I can still move in certain ways that, you know, just out of muscle memory. And that's because the experience gave that to me, gave me that knowledge. And Masonry is not any different. You have to experience it. And although we were one of the few obediences to stay open, to have Masonry still happening during the pandemic, it was online. Obviously, we couldn't meet in buildings. Online it's still a wonderful experience, but it is nothing like being in a lodge. Like, we still meet online. I still have meetings online, but I also go to meetings in person every month. So they complement, the online complements the in person, and the in person just stands alone as wonderful. So the long of it is, you have to be able to be physically present at a meeting. Now, for those who are, you know, far away, in order to go to the next degree, you have to be present to get the next degree. In order to become a Mason, you have to be initiated in the present. You can't do that online. You can do your studies online, like, you know, I'll study with a brother that's on the other side of the world online, no problem, but that brother has to come to a lodge, not necessarily here in the headquarters, but a lodge in our obedience, and physically take part of those rituals. It's just not the same online. And it will never be the same. So my caution for anyone who's like, well, I don't know if Universal Co-Masonry is for me, I'm going to go kind of shop around and look at the other places. Just be very careful about those that say they're strictly online. I would be very cautious with that, because I think they're not giving you the full experience that you deserve if you're trying to truly seek for that which has been lost.
So someone asked on YouTube sort of about your degree and like what order you are. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about who you are, your experience in Masonry.
I'm boring. I don't know if you want to talk about
what degree you are.
So with Universal Co-Masonry, I came into understanding. I joined Masonry very naively, in the sense of I didn't know anything about it. And it was actually, for those who are domestic inquirers here in North America, you often talk to Brother Rosario, and she was one of my first experiences, her and a few other brothers in Masonry. And I just remember thinking, I don't know who these people are. Like, I don't know them personally. Like, I was getting to know them. And I was like, but I know I want to be just like them. And that was my impetus for joining. And that was back in 2002. And I have never looked back. And I have been very, very grateful for my experiences. And trust me, there are moments that's been very, very hard. It's not like I just walked into heavens of bliss, you know, blissful moment and never left it. It's always been it's a struggle in all things. So I didn't know to go search other obediences, and I don't know if I would have. I like the dynamic of men and women together. I do think there's a place for all male groups and all female groups. Women and men grow in a different way when they're with their own sex, and they grow in another way when it's co-ed. And I love the balance. When I sit in lodge, depending on what lodge I'm in, some lodges tend to be either, a little bit more men in the room or maybe more women in the room. Here at headquarters, it's just the way it works. We have a lot, we're very equal. There's almost the same amount as men as there is women, and it just has a different energy. And I love that. So I don't know if I would go to an all-female organization in Masonry for me personally, but it was wonderful that I found Masonry. It has been life-altering. What else do you want to know?
Just what degree you have.
I possess the 33rd.
And for their edification, what does that mean? Do you
have all night? So when we look at Universal Co-Masonry, there are many different degrees. It's just like education in whatever country you're coming from. You have the primary education, and then you have the secondary, and then post-secondary. And I would kind of look at, in a very mundane way, Masonry the same way. You have those elementary degrees, which when I say elementary, they're pivotal to the whole experience. Just like when you're learning to read and write in formal education, it's pivotal to the rest of your existence, because if you can't read and write, you don't necessarily get to tap into the knowledge that comes in the higher grades. So in Universal Co-Masonry, as in Le Droit Humain and other orders like the Eastern Order of International Co-Freemasonic Masonry, we have what's, again, a ladder is one way of progressing to the top. So in all male masonry and oftentimes all female masonry, everyone joins in the first degree, ourselves included. You go first, second, and third. And then in those obediences outside of the ones I mentioned, you have to go find some other organization like the Scottish or the York Rite to get more degrees to kind of fill out the story. In Universal Co-Masonry, we have one ladder. So I don't have to go to other places to get the 18th degree, to get the Holy Royal Arch of Jerusalem degree. I just progress through one ladder. And so at the top of that ladder is the 33rd. And the 33rd is the administrative administrative body of the whole order. So we work with the head of our order to make sure that that everything is followed according to our constitution. And yes, we have a constitution, and yes, we have rules and regulations, and we do have to follow them by law, actually. So we make sure that that's done. We make sure that the lodges have what they need in regards to instruction and care. And then we work with the Most Sovereign to help open new lodges. We, worked on the Masonic Philosophical Society, opening that up, and just, it's kind of the brain with the head of the order in the middle. So it's more of the administrative part, but it's the last piece of the big puzzle of Masonry. I hate talking about myself. So is that enough?
I think that sufficiently.
Did I answer the question? Okay, good. Next question. Let's go to Brother Christine, and then I'll come back. Brother Christine, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Brother Katie. And thank you all the participants. The questions are sparking some curiosity in me. They talked a lot about symbolism, asked about symbolism. And we know that Masonry deals with allegory, and you talked a little bit about the black and white birds, and I think that goes along with Noah's Ark. But I'm curious as to if you can give us some more information about the importance of the mottos of Freemasonry and why they're important. Okay.
That's a good question. So Masonry does have mottos, as Brother Christine said. Each degree has a different motto, and you learn that as you go through the degrees. But the degrees in the 33rd, Order ab Chao, they like to be in Latin, which is always good, especially when we're international. So we have people of all different languages. It's nice to have things in Latin so that we can all come to it with our own perspective through our own language. But like Order ab Chaos, Chao ab Order, that is one motto, which is out of chaos, out of order out of chaos and chaos out of order. And there's other ones like, I always mess them up. Vince, autumn. Yeah, say it again.
Vince, Quise, Vince.
Yeah, I always say the middle one wrong. But when we look at that, you know, to conquer or to die, God my right, order out of chaos, and other ones, these mottos are axioms to help us in situations that we find ourselves in, you know, whether it's to help us understand our divine value, whether it's to help us through, you know, to mitigate a problem. They're there to help us get moral standing when maybe our knees are a little weak or our feet are a little off the path. So these mottos are in each of the degrees to help us with that specific, you know, lessons that we're learning to, you know, again, get it into our consciousness, that muscle memory, that spiritual memory, so that we don't ever forget where we're from and where we're going and what we're doing. And the mottos are, you know, it is the divine wisdom being distilled into certain words to help us, you know, to impact us on a resonant level. So we have those mottos. There's a bunch of other ones that are, again, it's specific to the degrees. I won't disclose them here, but the ones I did mention, those are very public. You can find them on our website. But that is something oftentimes, like with, for example, like order out of chaos, you know, that's, I think, is very explanatory. Like you go into a situation, oftentimes, especially as you get higher up in Masonry, you become like district deputies or masters of the lodge or whatever. And so you go and help and assist with problems that might be arising, and you're bringing order to the chaos. You know, you're putting things back as they should. And that makes sense. But the other half of the motto, which I think people often forget about or maybe don't know, is chaos out of order. Sometimes we can find ourselves too rigid, and it is our job to break that up a little bit and to get some, you know, air and water in there just to move it through so it doesn't become so stuck like a dam. And so oftentimes, here's an example for those who attend our MPS or Masonic Philosophical Society. So back in the day, it was here in Denver, we had an MPS and I was the moderator, and one of the brothers was presenting on the US Constitution and Freemasonry. And you know, we were talking, and this was before things got, you know, in current times where everything's a little too intense with the politics in some circles. This was before that time. So, you know, everyone's sitting there and they're all agreeing about how wonderful the US Constitution is. And that can kind of get flat after a while because, you know, we're all agreeing, you know, like, yeah, it's a great document. And next, you know, and there was a quiet moment, and I was kind of stressing out as a moderator because I was like, oh, you know, we need more discussion. This isn't going so well. And one of the brothers just in the middle of the science and says, well, I think the US Constitution sucks. And that, like, there was a huge, like, we had to get kicked out of the place we were at because we just kept talking about it. And I had asked that brother later, I said, do you really think the US Constitution sucks? And he said, no, I absolutely love it. But the conversation was just, it was a little too orderly for me. And we walked away with one of the best conversations we had ever had, because that brother started to poke holes of like, well, what about this perspective? And what about that perspective? And what about this use? And things we never had thought about. And it really stretched us. And so those mottos, you know, they help us not only live a moral life and how to remember them, but it also gives us a way to interact with those around us. So it's an interesting experience. You know, God my right. A lot of people struggle with that one, you know, especially people who tend to be a little more religious and maybe remove God from the individual. You know, what does that mean? God my right, or to conquer or to die? That seems very militant. Is Masonry militant? You know, so it asks lots of questions and gets you moving in, hopefully, in getting you thinking. The best way to kill Masonry is to stop thinking. That's the best way to lay it dead. And so Masonry provides many tools, mottos being one of them, to help us constantly refresh our thinking process. We'll go to Brother Patrick, and then we'll go to Jason.
All right. So our next question from YouTube again is from Mark David Vinzenz. He asks, what is the ultimate purpose of Masonry in the spiritual evolution of humanity / cosmic destiny?
That's a light question. Sure, no problem. What is the purpose of Freemasonry and cosmic destiny of humanity? Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
The reason why I kind of pause on that is I think if you ask any Mason that same question, you might get different answers. So my answer, I'm going to be a little bit more general, not generic, but general, to be a little bit more encompassing. But the purpose of Freemasonry is to assist humanity to its inevitable destiny. It does not necessarily know what that destiny is, but it is to assist them on their way. And I will give you my personal opinion. So this is Brother Katie, not Universal Co-Masonry in any way. I think ultimately man is searching for his return home. And you can't return home the way we are now, myself included. When you are steeped in matter, you have this problem where the consciousness within and the physical form, they're technically incompatible. And that's why you have this constant tension between, doing quote unquote what's right and living your base nature. Like they're two, your spirit talking on one side or your consciousness talking on one side, and it's your body talking on the other. And they have very different monologues. And so what Freemasonry does is it helps to emulsify the spirit and the matter. There's a reason why consciousness needs matter. What that reason is, I have no idea. But it needs it, because why else would we be here? That's one thing in nature. If you look at nature, and I would take this, I know Voltaire would be upset for taking science into the metaphysics, because technically you can't do that. But if you look at nature never produces an excess. It always uses the minimal amount of energy and resources to do whatever it's trying to do. The classic example I give all the time is you don't see a lion chasing a mouse to get food, because the amount of energy that is expended in the lion's body is not replaced by the consumption of the mouse. It doesn't work, right? But likewise, a lion will not hunt if it's not hungry. It will not eat, a zebra or whatever it's after if it's not hungry, because it's excess. Humans tend to move outside of that motif. And that's where we have that struggle, that tension. And so Freemasonry, its ultimate purpose is to try and cultivate each human being to their best physical and spiritual self, and then bring those opposites, or those, I don't even know if they're opposite, but to bring those two pieces of the human with a capital H, and bringing them together, not just like the double-headed eagle where you have black and white sitting side by side, but to emulsify it into a completely new spiritual species. That is the purpose of Freemasonry. How it is done, well, that's why you have a lot of Masonic obediences focusing on different things. We do not think networking is the way to do it, just to be upfront. Like we, study and relationships with people. It is very important to me how I interact with people. And, yes, I can trip and fall and not be the best person, but I try very hard to make sure that every person I see is truly seen and heard, because every person is their own universe. And how can you ignore a universe? And so what Masonry does is it helps sculpt the body so that the consciousness can reside within it, and therefore become a Superman, if you will, and become a better self. So that's a little bit more general, because how it is done, individual. And yes, there are a lot of right ways to do it, and there's definitely some wrong ways. And as an individual, you have to figure out what are the right ways, and stay away from the wrong ways. Let's go to Jason, and then we'll go back to Patrick if there's any more questions. Jason?
Well, other than the obvious, what's the difference between Co-Masonry and Freemasonry? I mean, I see the Co-Masonry is going to be a Zoom type of deal, and you just stated all of Freemasonry right there in that last answer, but is there any difference? Because you keep saying Co-Masonry.
There's no difference. Like it's like saying Christianity and Baptist. Like Baptist is
no difference.
Yeah, it's still a Christian.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
Yeah, so Co-Mason, and we get that question a lot, because we do add the co on there to signify that men and women are allowed. If you just say Freemasonry, you can be talking just in general.
Yeah, that's just straight men.
Yeah, it's just, and most people think it's just men because that's what they're familiar with. So when the founder, go ahead.
Oh, I like what you were talking about earlier when you said you like the connection it makes with men and women in one base, in one group. I'm like, yeah, the balance is perfect. And I can see the reactions of the faces, because communication is key. And when you have a masonry group where it's men and women. The balance is perfect.
It was interesting because when I first joined Masonry, it was a lot of women because men have a lot of choices, right? You can go to the Grand Lodge of England, you can go to all these different ones. Women don't. So when I first joined in the early 2000s, there was a lot of women. And then over time, that has changed, as I was saying. And the difference in the meetings, like it was the same material, but the energy was very different. The experience, like it just weighted the room differently. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with, one gendered groups. I don't have a problem with that. Like some people think that we need to get rid of, all female or all male. Like, nah, there's room for everybody.
No, every man needs a good woman. Every woman needs a good man. The balance is perfect. I wish I
Yeah,
could.
there's room
And the
for
whole
everybody.
thing, the whole key is thinking.
Mhm.
The thinker, yeah.
And the other thing too that I like in Freemasonry, and this is not just unique to Universal Co-Masonry, is that all ages, we strive very hard to make sure in our lodges, and this part is Universal Co-Masonry. We try very hard to make sure it is not homogenous in the sense it's like, oh, it's all women or it's all men or it's all one type of religion or one type of political party. It's like, I've had to tell a lodge like, hey, look, you have one side of the political spectrum in here. You need to get other political spectrums in here. Not just like go hunt for the other party and like bring them in, but like when you're looking for your candidates, you need to make sure you're being diverse, because sitting there with one political side or one religious side or one metaphysical understanding, it's just one piece of the symbol. For those who may be familiar with the circumpunct symbol, which is the circle with the point in the middle, if the truth is the singularity in the middle and the circumference is all of us standing on it, if we are all standing from the same position, we will only see the singularity from one perspective. But if you have a diversity in there, men, women, different ages, different religious backgrounds, different political understandings, like then you start to get the edge of that circle starts to fill out more, and you yourself get challenged. Because if I go into a room, it's all of the same faith that I am. I mean, there might be some discussion of, but it's more like minute, like, well, I think the details this way and you think the details that way. Well, sit in a room with someone who doesn't think that even exists, like someone who's like, I don't believe in reincarnation. Well, why? Tell me what how does your system work? And it's not, again, it's not to fight to win, but it is a discussion to understand. And so that diversity is paramount. And you will often find that's, again, another thing that we do in the Supreme Council, which is 33rds, is, making sure that the lodges are diverse, that it's not all one type of whatever thing that might be. So, Patrick, are there more questions?
There are a lot more questions. Some are more personal opinion questions.
Okay.
Some are more about the order. So
Just give me what you got. Whatever you got, whatever way you want to go.
Okay, so Aunt Mary's niece asks, do you have any recommendations on memorization technique?
Memorization technique. So memorization is important. And for those who are like kind of flipping out, like, oh, I'm not good at memorizing, don't worry. Like there's lots of ways to do it. So memorizing, it just depends on who you are and what your capability is. For me, we have ritual books that have the ritual in it. In my head, I'm reading the book in my head, and that's how I can memorize stuff. But oftentimes what I do is I just read the line and say it back 500 times until I get it perfect. And then I go to the next line and do the same thing. The one thing that we do very well at Universal Co-Masonry is we do ritual work very well. We're very disciplined and we memorize our lines, and sometimes you mess up and there's a brother there to help you, and that's okay, but memorizing takes practice, and you just have to find different ways to do it. Like we just got done with the workshop and I had to memorize a part. I kept jacking up like one line, and for me it's a lot of like, is it alphabetical or not? And I was like, oh, well, the D word comes before the E word alphabetically, so I need to make sure that's how I do it. Everyone else is going to be different. But the key is that you try. And ultimately in Masonry, it isn't so much like, oh, wow, Brother Katie got it like letter perfect, and it was just, amazing. If I messed it up, but I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I came as prepared as I possibly can be, no one's going to fault you. It's more of the conversation has to be had. If it's like, well, you knew you had a part and you didn't prepare. Why didn't you prepare? And that's where the conversation gets had. So memorization, there's a couple different techniques. And when you become a Mason, your expert brother or the guide that's there will help you with that. Finding the right way for you to memorize, because everyone's Everyone's different. I grew up in a time where memorization was really important, and it doesn't seem so now. So people that we're seeing coming into Masonry tend to struggle with memorization more than they used to. And so, yeah, you have to adapt. Next question.
All right, so next question from Billy Hicks. Do you practice Kabbalism? There's two questions in this, but the first one is, do you practice Kabbalism?
Like Kabbalah?
Yeah.
Does the order, or do I?
Does the order?
Okay, I was like, I don't know. So when you look at Kabbalah and you look at Hermeticism and you look at alchemy and all that, that's a part of the Western esoteric tradition. So you'll find aspects of that, sacred geometry, all of that stuff. Do we practice it like as an adherent to a particular system? No, we're Masons, and so we practice Masonry. That's what we do. But for me, like I gravitate a lot to alchemy. So a lot of the studies I've done is Freemasonry and alchemy. Maybe someone gravitates to Kabbalah, and so they can study Freemasonry and Kabbalah. Like, there's nothing you can't study. In fact, if you can't find something, then someone will help you. You know, what's your interest? Like, oh, sacred geometry and Freemasonry. Let's talk about that, and they'll get you connected. So, do we do it as an adherent to a system? No, but is it a part of Freemasonry? Yes. Next question, and then we'll go to Edgar.
Okay, so next question, skipping around a bit. Someone asks, for studying Joseph Campbell's hero's journey in science fiction, they ask, what would Masonry be in an interstellar context?
In an interstellar context, well, that's an imagination that I'd have to have. I don't think Freemasonry would be very different in an interstellar context, because the mythos, the truth claim, is really what it is. The kernel of the truth that the myth surrounds is constant, it's consistent. So right now, speaking of Joseph Campbell, we talked about the hero's journey last month with the journey of a seeker. And I'm currently reading, we have a youth organization, the Order of the Knights of the Round Table, that we also run. Brother Benjamin and Brother Patrick work with us in that. And I'm studying the Romance of the Grail, which is by Joseph Campbell. And it's the myth of King Arthur. And it's interesting because if you pull back the layers of King Arthur, it goes to other myths like Tristan and Isolde and so forth. And I think when you look at Masonry in an interstellar or cosmic perspective, again, the story up front might be different, because cultures, whether it's on this planet or presumably on other planets, they're going to be different. And what speaks to one culture does not speak to another. So the vehicle in which that truth claim is delivered will be different, but the truth claim itself will be consistent, because just like the gravitational constant of the universe is consistent, you'll find the same thing. Gravity is consistent, although it's expressed differently from celestial body to celestial body. So I think that's what Freemasonry would be. It would still be gravity, but it will express differently on the outside. So you may be heavier in one place and lighter in another place, or it may look this way compared to that way. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
That was a good one. I've never been asked that one. What's another one? And then we'll go to Edgar. Sorry, Edgar, we'll get to you in a second.
Okay, so the next question is, why are female members called brothers and not sisters?
We get that question a lot. Why am I brother Katie and not sister Katie? So when we say, like Brother Patrick or Brother Benjamin or Brother Katie, it's a capital B, it's a title. And if you look at the words brother and sister, that separates. When everyone has the same title, there's no division. And in Freemasonry, especially in Universal Co-Masonry, we are very much looking to unite. We wear the same uniform. So my uniform looks the same as the other brothers in here, and theirs looks like mine. We have, I don't come in with like feathers in my hair and like lots, like I take my earrings out. I wouldn't wear these to lodge, because we're working to unite. So our titles are the same. And brother isn't denoting a heritage as such so much as like, oh, I'm the son of someone, or I'm a brother to someone. It's talking about that we have one father, which is the fatherhood of God, under the banner of the brotherhood of man. We're all mankind. So it is a title. There are some women who are upset, that try to apply and they want to be called sister. We're all brothers. And speaking of Annie Besant, I don't remember the name of the journal. Maybe you would, Brother Patrick, because you work in our archives. But we have many decades of archives here at headquarters, and there's I think it was a Phoenix, where Brother Annie Passant, and in one, up to a certain point, was called Sister Passant, and then at some point it changed into Brother Passant. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
The Co-Mason.
The Co-Mason, thank you. I was thinking it was the Phoenix, but it's the Co-Mason. And one of our brothers here was like, well, that's interesting. Let's see what happened. And what happened was, it wasn't men coming in and quote unquote oppressing women and saying we're all brothers. The women said, we don't want to be called sisters. We want to be called brothers because it's a title. It isn't a denotion of gender. And so that's why we're called brothers, that we're from the same family. We're all brothers. There's no distinction between us whatsoever. And then we'll go to Edgar, and then we'll go back to Patrick.
Yeah, my question has to be with the seven bodies. The Hermetism, the mental and astral, and those bodies. Does the bodies have to be with the degrees, or how do you guys open those bodies or train those bodies, or do you guys work on those type of things?
Are you talking, clarify for me really quick, because I don't think I understand your question. Because we call like the higher degrees the higher bodies. That's what I'm referring. Are you referring to that? Like, do we open right up in the 14th? Or are you talking like the astral body versus the Kamarupa?
Yeah.
Like the second
Well,
one?
the astral body, the mental body, and
so what's your question? Now that I understand which bodies you're talking about, what's your question again?
Does those bodies has to be with the degrees, or doesn't have to be nothing with that? Or
it depends on what you believe, Edgar. There's some people that they would say absolutely, and some people don't have any knowledge of what you're even talking about. And if you're curious about what he's talking about, I would recommend the 7 Principles of Man. Brother Benjamin, we throw that in the chat, by Annie Besant. Kind of gives a good layout of what those 7 bodies are. And it's just talking about the layers of the body. So no, they don't necessarily directly correlate to a degree, although some degrees will impact other bodies. The astral body is going to be impacted different than the mental versus the Buddhic. And, like, it just depends on what the degree is trying to get you to do. So, or when I say get to do, like, get you to understand. So it'll impact differently. If you take one degree, it's going to impact the bodies differently than another. But are they laid out by the bodies? No, they're not. Okay, we'll go back to Brother Patrick, and then we'll go to Laverne.
Okay, so Billy Hicks asks, does your order believe in reset events like the Great Deluge, plasma apocalypse, or solar apocalypse?
Believe in a reset. First off, I wouldn't say Freemasonry, Billy, believes, the word believes in this, because, there's lots of brothers that I know that think that the deluge did happen, and lots of brothers who think it didn't happen, and they're both Masons. So it's not that, like, if you believe one way or the other, then you're right and you fit with our narrative. But Freemasonry uses human history as a backdrop, as the landscape for its the best way to say it, if I can cut myself off, is Freemasonry is a historical fiction. There are aspects to it that have historically happened, and then there's aspects that have been fictionalized to create the experience. So, the Great Deluge, that is in one of the Masonic degrees, if you look at it. The apocalyptic stuff, not so much. I can't say I've ever sat in a degree where it was apocalyptic. It's more about dealing with the things that are happening in the here and now. And when I say the here and now, I'm not talking about modernity, like what's happening in 2024. It's talking about the lifelong struggles that every human being, no matter when they're born and when they die, have struggled through. Those constant existential experiences. That's what Freemasonry believes in. So there are some brothers who believe in Anunnaki, and there's some brothers who don't, and there's some who don't even know what it is, like, and things like that. So there's space for everyone, is what I'm trying to say. But does Freemasonry believe in, those type of things? If it's a part of human history, it's going to be in Masonry. If it's not, you probably won't see it. One more question from you, Brother Patrick, or are we good? We got them all.
There are quite a few questions, so it's really up to...
Okay, so let's do one from... How are we doing? You guys are doing great. I love questions. I'm looking at my clock here. Okay, we have time. So let's do one more from Brother Patrick and then we'll go to Laverne.
Okay, so the next question is someone asked if you could say anything about what they call the Hiram Abiff ritual or the initiation ritual.
No, that's an easy one. No, I cannot. So in Masonry, we do not talk about the rituals themselves or any of the legends or like I could sit down and I could literally tell you the whole thing about Masonry and it would have zero impact on you. Not in the, again, not in the way it should. And that goes back to that what I was talking about ayahuasca as an example. Like you can go and do whatever, but if you don't put it the work and the effort and the time and the training and the understanding behind it, you will never ever have the same experience as the shaman who did or the Freemason who has. Like you'll have some experience. I'm not denying that, but it will never be of the magnitude that you could have had. And I think, you know, and then you go back and try to be the Mason or try to be the shaman, and you've changed and altered the experience already. You know what I mean? So no, we don't talk about ritual. Let's go to Laverne and we'll go back to Brother Patrick.
Greetings, everyone. You kind of sort of answered all the questions. It's like I will send you a message and I'm asking because I don't want to be rude and say anything while others are talking. But I realized you had it on mute. But since you answered a lot of the questions that I really wanted answers to, I thank you for the confirmations. I wanted to know about the dues. How do you implement the dues? Are they quarterly? Say, okay, you know, there are a lot of fees and everything. Like, how do you work all of that in?
That's a wonderful question because we get that question quite a bit. So the fees, there's four different types of fees, and they're actually pretty straightforward. It's not as complicated as it sounds. There's the application fee, non-refundable. So if you end up applying like 15 times, you have to pay the application fee each time. So just keep that in mind. It is a non-refundable fee. Each lodge has a different fee because, you know, depending on where you are, like it's much more, you know, expensive to live in one place than another. Like the fees will be different. So the fees are based on the area. So the application fee. If you are accepted, so the only thing right now, like if you're looking to apply, the only fee you have to worry about is the application fee. Once you're accepted and gone, you know, start going through the process of initiation, that's when some other fees come in. So as I mentioned, we have a uniform. It is not a uniform I wear to the store. I would never wear it in public. If you want to know what the uniform is, you can go to our website. Brother Benjamin, if you can put the website in the chat, we have a picture right on the opening screen. We wear all white, which is a very different. Most people usually wear all black or black and white, but we're all white. If you don't want to go to the website and you just want to know, it looks like kind of like the robe that Neo wears in the Matrix, that kind of black, but it's all white. And then for depending on what degree you have a stole that goes over it, and there's sashes and there's aprons and all sorts of stuff. So you have the fee of getting your ritual, your regalia. That once you buy that regalia, the gown or the cassock and the stole and all that stuff, you wear that to any lodge that is ours. You don't have to buy a new one each place you go. So if I go visit Brother Maya in her lodge, like I can wear my uniform. If she comes visits here, like we wear the same thing. So that includes white shoes. We have a distribution store, so you don't have to go find white shoes, especially that's very difficult sometimes. And so that's one cost. So that's the second cost. The one that Laverne brought up, dues. Each lodge sets their own dues. And again, that's based off of their local economy. Like the Philippines has a different economy than the US, and Croatia has a different economy than Costa Rica. So you wouldn't necessarily just have one blanket set of dues. So the dues are going to be varying. That's why we'll ask you, like, where are you at? Where do you live? And this is the lodge to be at. So this is the dues that you would owe. You can choose to pay those dues all at once for the year because they're annual, or you could do it every month. You can do it every quarter. I mean, the money that is collected, again, we're not an organization that's looking to get people's money, but in order to do the spiritual work, you have to buy stuff. Like you have to have a building and you have to have implements, candles and incense. Like you have to have that stuff and you have to pay for it. So the dues are centered around that. Like, is there a rent or an HOA? Is there, do we have to buy certain things? So those dues are they're annual. Some brothers, again, pay them right up front, all of it. Some brothers choose to do it month by month. Just depends on what the brother does. So that's up to the brother how they want to pay it. A master will not come to you and be like, you didn't pay for 6 months. They will say, hey, you're getting behind in your dues. Be careful. Like, you don't want to get too far behind because it's really hard for you to catch up. That's the third one. And then the fourth one is there is a contribution of just benevolence. So you make a donation each meeting based off of what you can afford. No one's going to track it like, oh, Brother Katie only paid $5 or she paid 5 million. No one tracks what you donate on that level, but it's kind of like a collection plate is passed. It's not a plate, and that money goes for benevolence. So, we had some brothers that were impacted by the recent hurricanes, that type of stuff. The bag of benevolence can go to assist brothers in need. And if there aren't any brothers, then it can go to the community, or sometimes it can go back to headquarters and we'll distribute it to brothers who may not be in the lodge that need help. So that's the 4 different types. There's the application fee, the cost of the regalia, which is the one-time fee. You have dues, and then a charitable contribution each meeting. That's the 4. Laverne, do you have a follow-up question? And then we'll go to Brother Patrick.
Yes, I do. Okay, I've been in several houses, and some do things the same, and some do, I won't say things, some do events the same, and some do events different. I would like to know, do you constantly have events, and I'm saying outside of the rituals, like when I was in the Elks, they would always do these, well, I won't just say the Elks, some of the Masons, some of the houses just did a lot of events to where they would do like food, fundraisers and different events like to raise money, and some would do events as to where you don't have any of those events. You only come to do what needs to be done as far as the rituals, and that's it.
So the short answer is no, we don't do fundraisers. Like the order does not host spaghetti dinners, pancake breakfasts, any of that. We don't do that. But the lodges can choose to do that. Like there's one lodge in particular that I think of that they have like an annual holiday fundraiser that they do for their local area. And again, that money isn't so much like raised for the lodge, but it's like, oh, we're going to adopt this kid and give the money to that kid, whether it's for medical bills or college or whatever. But that lodge has done that for years. But that lodge is usually it's kind of the exception. Most people, if you want to do that, there's other organizations that do that far better than we do. And so, no, we do not host that. We do have conventions, or what we call workshops, once every trimester. So we have, but that's all ritual work. So like we just finished, yesterday was our last day for the one in the fall, where brothers from around the world come in and we have ritual work for specific degrees, and then we'll have one in April, and then we'll have one in August. But that's just ritual work, and we don't do any fundraising. Okay. We have time for a few more questions, Brother Patrick.
Right. So I've got a question here. What is the Masonic year AL? What does that mean?
Brother Benjamin is not going to like the way I pronounce Analucius, but it means year of light. So in Freemasonry, we have a different date system. Freemasonry is like its own planet in some ways. We have our own language. We have our own way of writing things. We have our own calendar. Our Masonic calendar is different than the Gregorian calendar. But AL is Analucius, or Lucis for Brother Benjamin, which means year of light. And it just has a different date on it. So our paperwork isn't done in the 2004. It's done a little bit differently, but that's more internal, doesn't affect externally. Brother Patrick.
Next question is from Mithras 369. He asks, can you explain your view on Mithraism and how it was from the Mediterranean to Scotland? How does it relate to Freemasonry?
So Mithra, the cult of Mithras is an ancient tradition, mystery tradition, or mystery religion. And Freemasonry is predicated on those ancient mystery schools. And so it's not that you walk into Masonry and it's like, oh, this is the cult of Mithras. But there are many aspects of the cult of Mithras that you'll see in Masonry. And again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. You need to go through the ritual if you want to figure it out. But you will find remnants of that in Freemasonry, because Freemasonry is a mystery religion. And when I say religion, I'm not talking, like I was saying earlier, like Christianity. Again, we have people of all different religions and faiths and beliefs that come to Freemasonry and coexist just fine. But it is a mystery religion. It is a religion, comes from the Latin word religulare, and it means to return, to go back to. And that's why, to the question that was like, what's the purpose of Freemasonry? It's to go back to the source, but we're not going to go back as we, in the state that we left it. We'll come, hopefully, be back to it in a higher form of consciousness. And the cult of Mithras and various schools, the Orphic schools, Pythagoras, all the different schools, all the ancient mystery traditions are going to show up in some form, in some way of Masonry. And that's why, like, I'm just like, Freemasonry, there's just so much to learn. Like, if you're into the Pythagorean school, like, you could find all sorts of different stuff on, numbers. If you're really big into numbers, like, there's lots of different things to look at in Masonry. If you're looking at it from a mythos standpoint and you want to look at all the different myths and where it shows up in Masonry, you can find that too. So there's just so much. But with the cult of Mithras, there's going to be different aspects. The way their lodges were laid out are very similar to the way that our lodges are laid out and stuff like that. Brother Patrick, we have time for one more question.
Okay, so someone just asked, I'm going to summarize their question. What is our relation to the operative Masonic guilds of the Middle Ages that built cathedrals and built physical buildings?
So it's an interesting question, because a lot of people say that Freemasonry hails from the building guilds of the Middle Ages. Universal Co-Masonry asserts that, like I just said, that we're much older than that we hail from a much older time with the mystery traditions and cults. And when I say cults, I don't mean that in the negative sense of the word. What you see is when Freemasonry, so the bedrock of modern Freemasonry, is coming out not just in the Age of Enlightenment and the Renaissance, but it goes further back into the bedrock of the Western esoteric tradition. So, Kabbalah, alchemy, Neoplatonism, those type of things. Gnosticism is another one. And what you'll see is, as it was being passed through the ages of human history, moving up to the modern time, it picked up ways to adapt and to be, to survive. Because Theodosius II, and was it 383? I always get the date wrong.
I think it's 383.
It's like the late 4th century AD. He literally, this emperor, this Roman emperor, said, all pagan religions, if you practice it, will put you to death. And so you'll see a lot of the pagan religions went underground. Anything that was occult, like Gnosticism is, mystic Christianity, that went underground because it wasn't accepted at the time. And Freemasonry had to survive that decree, if you will, as well. And so you find that we picked up its implements in the building guilds. And you will find in many of the manuscripts, like the Halliwell and whatnot, that go back very far, that there were women in guilds, in the building guilds. So this idea that, women, it's new to the scene, is not true. That's something that came out of the Victorian era, where women were separated from the men. In Pythagoras' school, his wife and his daughters were in it. In the building guilds, you had women who were, and it wasn't common, but it was there, women who were part of the guilds. And so Freemasonry picked up the implements such as aprons and working tools and whatnot, and the idea that we're building the temple of humanity, that got picked up and was able to allow Freemasonry to exist without having any huge repercussions until you get into, the era of Italian Renaissance and whatnot. And that's when you start to see the papal bulls coming out, where Freemasonry starts to get on the radar of big religions. So I think that's it. Is there any other questions, Brother Patrick? I think that
there's some, but
we're out of time.
They're going to take a long time.
Okay. So I want to thank everyone from all our different platforms coming in. Thank you for joining us on the Masonic Seminar Series. Like I said, this was not a traditional type presentation. Normally there is a topic. I was thinking about for next month, we talked last month, back it up a little bit. We talked last month about the journey of the seeker a lot of the questions we get here at the general office when people are applying is like, what can I do to prepare myself for initiation? So I think I'm going to focus on that. Some key ways to, books that I would recommend, virtues and principles that I would work on if you're not already working on things like that, that would just help you feel better as you get closer to the door of initiation, that when you walk through it, that even though you may not know what's on the other side of the door, you are physically, spiritually ready to embrace the new experience. So I think that's what I'm going to talk about next month, but you have to show up to see if I actually will, because I always like to change my mind at the last minute. So I'd like to keep you guys on your toes. So if you have any questions, you have my email. Since I send out the invites, you can email me, or you can see if they get answered in future seminars. I again appreciate all those who are returning and those who are new for joining us. And again, Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin for their help with all the lighting and all the lovely stuff. And this was recorded, so if you want to look back at past seminar series that we've done, you can go to our YouTube channel, type in the Masonic Seminar Series, and we pop up. And there's more than 10, I think. There's quite a few recordings that you can go back and look at. And sometimes you'll see two that have the same name, but they're going to be different presentations because I never present the same thing twice. So have a wonderful night. And if you celebrate Thanksgiving, may you have a wonderful holiday. And I will see you guys in December. Stay safe, stay active, keep yourselves on the path to wherever we're going, and ask all the right questions. Have a wonderful night.